I guess we'll start by a little bit of introduction. Rui, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm actually the cat among the pigeons here because I don't work in analytics or data or search or digital marketing. I'm actually a privacy, tech ethics and data protection specialist. Please don't throw things. So my view on analytics is I think, probably going to be quite a different one to what you're used to hearing. And yeah, I hope you'll bear with me. I've been doing this job for more than 10 years. And generally, what I try to do is help organizations stitch together law, technology, and humanity. That's me.
Fantastic. So I'm Anna. I set up my own analytics agency called Polka.Data about 7 years ago. So I've got about 15 years of analytics experience, mostly working in e-commerce, and really sort of focusing around the Google stack and making sure that people with websites actually get what they want out of it. And so supporting marketing teams in being able to track the right thing, get the right data, follow the right rules, come out with the right dashboards, and be able to actually use their analytics implementation. So yeah, pretty techy, but also now obviously running my own business in the analytics space, so that's quite an interesting one in the mix as well. So yeah, a bit different.
And you're also involved in Measure Camp.
Oh yeah, I also help run Measure Camp London, so if anybody hasn't got a ticket, snap one up now, there's a couple left. For London Measure Camp at the end of the month, which is going to be a great event. So all sorts of different topics going on there as well.
Yeah.
And you'll be there?
Yeah.
We need your intro too.
Yeah, I'm Nate Burke. I'm the founder and CEO of Digenius. We're a SaaS tech platform. We're a performance platform, so we have our own version of analytics for certain use cases. And I guess for the last 25 years, I've been in analytics, primarily trying to figure out how to increase results, decrease costs, sales, revenue generation, etc. So I come at it from a very business point of view with a lot of tech as well. So we thought we'd do this a little bit differently. We thought we'd first, we'll open up for questions at the end, but we thought we'd also maybe start initially and see if anybody in the audience has any, because we don't have a set agenda to talk about, so we thought, if there's any hot topics, I mean, in analytics, it's a big field, right? So you've got GA4, you've got attribution, you've got privacy, security, all these different things going on in the industry, in the topic. So we thought, are there any topics that people have on their mind that they're dealing with now, that they're thinking about, that, just anything at all? We may not talk about it, but it'd be great if we could get anybody to have any opening questions or comments about anything in the field of analytics. And we'll get a microphone up if you just raise your hand. Yeah,
we've got a couple
back there. Yeah.
Fantastic.
We're worried nobody would want to. So.
Yeah, but we want to make it relevant. So, there's no point us sitting here talking about something that's not relevant to you guys. So, brilliant.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I use plausible analytics consciously instead of Google Analytics because it means that we have no cookies. Is there anything else I need to know, though? Is it as good as Google Analytics? Are there any caveats? What should I know? I've only just started with it.
So,
I didn't quite catch that. Can you repeat it?
The questioner uses plausible analytics rather than Google Analytics, but has just started with it and wants to know whether or not it's better. Is there anything to watch out for? So, from my professional end of things, yay. Because plausible analytics is a self-contained space. The data's not being reused in other commercial ventures that you have no visibility or control over, and that's good. And if you're using it cookieless, it would be better to use it with cookies and get consent from purely ethics point of view. Again, just my professional opinion. But in terms of features, in theory, what we do is we decide what we want out of something, what we've got to work with to go and get it, and then we go and do a search on what platforms and things are available out there, and then narrow down the list according to the shortlist and make a determination based on appropriateness and price. Back in the real world, we do a quick search for a phrase that we want and pick the cheapest thing that comes up. So I think the key to getting the best out of whatever analytics platform you're going to use is to start by defining your needs. What do you want out of it? What are you trying to achieve? And what have you got to work with? Because there are loads of features, but they may not all be equally useful to you. So I would say start with a round table of the people who are working in areas that need analytics and data, and bring it right back to first principles. What do you want? What are you trying to get out of this? What are you going to do?
Yeah, and once you've done that, have you got the skills to be able to use it well? And is it going to be able to help you meet your business objectives? So yeah, you've got to work out and analyze whether or not it's going to be able to do all of those things. But yeah, there's a lot of platforms out there now. So it's been really interesting to see the change in the landscape, going from sort of where it was 80% Google Analytics adoption, and be interesting to see some stats. I don't have the stats, but it'll be really interesting at some point when somebody does round those up for us, to work out who the other sort of, there's such a wide range now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, there's one in, I know in Germany, there's a deep distrust of Google in Germany in particular. There's one called Matimo Analytics that over 1 million companies use. I know some guys in the performance marketing space that refuse to use Google Analytics of any kind because they don't want Google to know their performance of the site. They just want to buy the traffic and not have the actioneer have access to their bank account, as it were. So yeah, it's a big topic in analytics, and there are some. I mean, GA is free, so it's the default. But there are other, and some big companies don't want to. They want to keep a very clear from a business privacy, business secret point of view. There's some compelling reasons not to use Google in circumstance.
yeah, we've had two clients make a very hard drive away from Google, based on the advice of legal teams. However, they couldn't actually come up with a sort of very strong answer other than, oh no, we just need to move away from Google. I didn't actually get the facts. They didn't seem to have those. So that was a really interesting one. And then the other team spent 6 months trying to move away from Google before conceding that they just needed the Google Analytics back, and they just recommenced that project. So it's been a really interesting time recently. But yeah.
I think on the end user end, people are less inclined to accept and to consent to cookies for Google Analytics because they have developed an awareness from media coverage and legal action and whatnot that kind of Google bad. They don't really know why, and they don't really know kind of whether anybody else is better. But if you say to people, "Oh, we're using Google," I mean, they kind of know it's evil corp, or they believe it is. And that's true of businesses as well. So just like with all things data, you've got to understand the problem before you can design what it is you're going to look at and how, and then use the information. So, but I think it's really positive that there is a rise in analytics and search platforms that are actually putting things like privacy, protection against disinformation, hits the mic. Things like that ahead of pure kind of functionality and numbers, because we can't necessarily quantify privacy or disinformation or democracy, but we kind of know that they're important, and it's really encouraging to see that pivot in the space to people saying actually we can't count it in numbers, but we do think privacy is a good thing, so let's bring that in.
Yeah. I think there was another question in the back somewhere.
It was similar.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and another one there.
It kind of builds on what you have just spoken about, but do we have any stats at all which indicate how many people are now declining cookies versus how many are accepting?
That's an interesting one, and you're not going to get one number there either. So one, hard to track, bit of an issue there. Secondly, it's been really interesting, and I've had some good conversations with people about how different industries and different countries have such different rates. So we're looking around the 40% for some. So I know there's sort of a lot less acceptance in places like Germany, but then also certain websites are, seem to have that sort of struggle as well. And you wonder whether or not that's the industry or actually their particular implementation of their cookie banner and their policies. So whether or not that's been interesting. But yeah, I mean, 40% is probably one of the higher ones that I've come across. Yeah, that's the only number I've seen. But we work with so many other people that actually quite a few of them are going to be a lot less, a lot less.
Yeah, my experience is the same. It's difficult to get numbers. And even if you've got numbers, it's difficult to compare them and make sense of them because you don't know whether or not a particular type of cookie was declined because that person perceived it as a threat, or whether all cookies were declined because that was easier than going through granular settings, or whether all cookies were accepted because it was made too difficult to decline them with granular settings, or whether the UI of the consent dialogue actually kind of discouraged people from understanding and exercising choice. So there are loads and loads of factors in why people are declining cookie consent. And I think the whole cookies thing it's got out of control. And it's become about cookies, not about privacy, choice, agency, and respect. So moving to server-side tracking, from a privacy point of view, that's even worse.
Yeah.
But because you can't, the end person can't see it. They don't even know that there is a choice to be exercised. Whereas with the cookies, at least there was a law that said if you're going to do this to people, you need to let them know. And if it's these types, then you need to ask them. So there is a real arms race going on between people who want to know stuff and people who don't want stuff about them to be known because they don't know who's out there, they don't trust who's out there. People will be people. So the balance keeps shifting. But obviously people declining cookies that are intended for analytics undermines the integrity of the analytics data set because you don't know what you don't know. And so I know this is a heinous thing to say, but maybe analytics isn't everything.
Outrageous. It's my life. No, you definitely have a point. But what I try and encourage people to do is take it with a pinch of salt. It's a trend against itself. So, people are looking at it. And I always say, do not ever use this for your bottom line business, finances or reporting or health of the business. Use it to say, okay, well, from the data I've got, this bit is performing in this way and that bit is performing in that way. So that means I could invest in this or that and that this is working. So always take it with a pinch of salt and just understand that it's a trend against what other trends you can see. It is never going to be 100% accurate. It never has been. Even 10 years ago, it wasn't 100% accurate. And that's okay. At least we get more data than you do as to guessing how many people walked past a billboard and how many people actually read the content and things like that. So we're lucky that we can have some data and we can just make the most of what we have and use it for trends and sort of gauging where we are without saying, right, there was exactly 734 people who did this. No, it would never be exactly that. It would have been maybe that many devices or that many of this. But yeah, it's all a bit of a gauge. And as long as you understand that, you can, use it wisely.
Yeah, when I started in the 90s, 97, 98, with the first PPC engines came out, but the websites, there was no analytics. So you had to track by tracking codes. And so we're seeing a kind of resurgence of people doing that just because there's attribution issues, there's privacy issues, there's cookie issues, et cetera. So in the advertising world, whether you have links or whether you have ads coming in, or whether you have whatever, there's to kind of get a better view of what works or doesn't. If you start putting tracking back in the URLs and back in the links and not rely on analytics as a source of truth necessarily, then you can sometimes get better attribution models by kind of going back to a manual view of how to track like it used to be 20 years ago, is some of what we're seeing as well.
Do you know what I would really like to see? I would like to see people pointing their analytics at the privacy information to see who's interacting with it and whether or not it's actually producing the desired effect.
So we had a little look into that, and we were trying to say, well, okay, of the data that we have, what percentage of people then actually click read more, find out more, privacy settings, and that sort of thing. Now, obviously, once they've clicked accept, but yeah, it was interesting. There were some websites where it was about 2%. Mm-hmm. There were others it was about so maybe 15, or I think one of them was, no, it wasn't 20%. No, but yeah, you know, we just about got into double digits on 1 or 2, but yeah, predominantly it's pretty low. Or at that point, they've already said no, so we don't know. So we don't know what we're missing, which is half the fun, right? You know, we like a dynamic life. It would be boring if everything was straightforward. So yeah, no, you don't know what you don't know, and you do have to just take that. It is the best information you have available. So do with it what you can.
Yeah, chances are the sort of people who read privacy notices are also the sort of people who decline cookies for anything that's not strictly technically functionally essential.
And that was a really interesting way that the whole cookie implementation thing was handled, and people just got really, like, the fear-mongering about them. And we're like, but how are we going to know what's in your basket from one page to the next without this sort of, this is just technology. Now, yes, there's people manipulating it badly. So that really affected the press of these sorts of things. So it's been a really interesting journey.
Yeah, the nuance around that, it doesn't make for good media stories, so you don't get it. But, you know, it's not that all cookies are bad. It's not that all cookies are great. This is a piece of technology. It's how you use it, where you use it, when you use it, and, you know, what for, that makes all the difference. But then the kind of press towards reducing friction in the journey kind of works against itself, because friction's actually a safety measure. Like, we have brakes in vehicles, they work by friction, and if we didn't have those brakes, it would be much more dangerous to drive at, you know.
Sounds so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the biggest problems I see in sites is if you have the lawyers set the policy, you want to have the lawyers like, okay, here you go, but then have the marketers put a bit of polish on it. If you don't have some polish on it, you'll get moved in a certain direction. It's just like accepting email subscriptions. You can do it certain ways, and based on how you do it, you'll get 20% versus 80%. So it's just a matter of working out what's your business interest and how do you want it to spin, and making sure you comply with a bit of spin, if that makes sense.
Never get a lawyer to write a privacy notice.
No, they write it, but
That's
you know.
why they take it off the site. I mean,
I mean, actually, as marketers, privacy notice is the ultimate professional challenge, because you both have to be scrupulously honest, and you have to persuade people that engaging with you is still a good idea at the same time. Like, that's like marketer Olympics.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I can't say, there's a lot of challenges go into it. There really are. Yet to see a perfect one.
Oh, well, I can give you the URL of my website.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Alex. The elephant in the room, I guess, is GA4. And probably safe to say that they will never be GDPR compliant in the European Union because they're based in the US. With that said, and also if you look at the cookie directive that we have within the European Union, you can say no to cookies, but every single company interprets performance cookies as functional cookies. So is privacy a lost cause?
No.
They don't. Not every company treats performance as functional, not necessarily.
I mean, you could say, well, there are movements around the world to disrupt and undermine democracies which seem to be succeeding. Is democracy a lost cause? I mean, we'd hope not, right? And privacy isn't a lost cause. It's a battleground. It's a battleground between convenience and protection, between corporate power and individual agency, between jurisdictions, between industries. But it's not dead. There have been some areas of some industries that have taken a bad faith approach to categorizing cookies. There have been some who don't really know what it is they're working with, so they just copy what the next person is doing and hope that's okay. And then there are people who really put an effort into trying to do the right thing the right way. Incidentally, the problem with Google from GDPR point of view isn't just that they're in the US, it's that they reserve the right and the privilege and prerogative to reuse any and all of the data that flows through their hands in ways that benefits Google and they don't tell anybody else about.
I think it has been interesting with GA4 because they have at least suggested they are attempting to be a little more legal. If that's a fair way to put it.
Give them a cookie.
Yeah, but so that, you know, they've taken a few steps and there were a few bigger fundamental flaws with Universal. So, and also there are other benefits to GA4. And the thing is, like, what we make sure happens is that we do everything we can to not collect anything personal in Google Analytics, so that at least we're covering our backs. And you know, if there is ever, you know, data that goes anywhere, it's just a number and it can't be used. Well, don't tell me what it can be used for, but you know, that person cannot, you know, be identified. So that's the key thing. And with GA4, the change in the sort of behavior model or the tracking model and things like that has been nice to see that they're not still working on the 20-year-old technology. And it's nice to see some other things. Yes, there's then those other challenges. And then there's the privacy side. And then the other thing that kind of is irritating is like in about 2011 when they said, oh no, actually, we're not going to give you your organic keywords in Google Analytics as to what people typed in before they got to your site. Quite a few of you probably be too young to remember that. But you could get those keywords if you were paying for ads.
Okay.
So again, now we see the similar thing where GA4 is saying, well, actually, you can get lots of data. You get the data and then they're like, well, it's not quite accurate, is it? No, if you want accurate data, you have to pay for it. So this is another frustration that comes into the mix, is that, you know, if you want it to be a little bit more accurate, you do have to then invest in BigQuery and things like that. And it's like, are we paying for, you know, accuracy? Are we paying for, you know, to not be privacy compliant? That's the kind of point I'm getting to is actually with those keywords back in the day. It was like, oh, privacy really matters. We're going to take this away. Oh no, if you give us your money, you get the keywords. And now it's sort of the same. You know, oh well, it's sort of a pinch, so you know, it's not going to be perfectly accurate, but it is in BigQuery. So give us your money, and we'll throw the whole accuracy. That's been an interesting one. So.
Yeah, there are a lot of jurisdictional issues with analytics. A couple of years ago, I don't know if you remember, Austria passed a law to make it illegal to use Google Analytics in Austria, and they would fine companies in Austria directly if they had Google Analytics on their site, because their view was that information flowed back to the US, which eventually ended up with European citizens in the hands of information in the hands of the NSA, and because that's the way it works, right? So
They
there
didn't
are
pass a separate law. They enforced the GDPR.
Yeah. So so it's very jurisdictional in terms of how it kind of gets played out a bit. So different regions will have very different views on analytics, and I'm an American, right? So it's do you want the Americans to have your data is kind of a very global topic.
I like to think if we actually just slide by enough without any PII in it, then they're not actually gonna know what to do with it to identify anybody. It's fine,
I mean, that's a school of thought. That's a point of view.
It is. I mean, you know, that's how I sleep. No, you know, I don't want to think about all the other things. I never.
Well, being someone who does that for a living, the other challenge is that it's not just about individual identifiability and privacy. It's also about group effects. So there has been a lot of academic literature coming out lately about the wider societal effects of things like targeted advertising, in that this has discriminatory effects, increases wealth gaps, fuels disinformation, polarization. It's not inherent to the technology, It's a side effect of the way the technology is being used. So, yeah, you could solve the privacy problem by not letting any individual be singled out, although there are ways to single out individuals without giving them numbers, like unique patterns. But also then you've got the other challenge, which is, you know, the social effects of micro-targeting and of essentially surveillance advertising, which isn't inherently a bad and wrong thing, but it's kind of dangerous, and it needs a lot of care put into it to make sure that the adverse effects are thought about up front and mitigated. And, you know, in today's busy, hectic, full of data world, like, who's got time for that? And I think it's quite important to make time for that, but then, you know, I work in tech ethics, so I would say that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on the company, and you know, it's like you've got you've got the 98% of companies that are small, and then the 2% that are big, and the issues in analytics are very different in those two worlds. So the bigger companies, you know, need to figure out all these things. The smaller ones, they've got too many other problems. They're just going to, like small clients, you just go GA automatically because it's easy, everybody uses it, whatever. It's kind of when you have specific reasons not to use it, typically is when it gets used. I don't know if you have, I mean, like, what's the difference between big and small in analytics? I mean,
I don't know. I think the kind of one challenge is that people want a one-size-fits-all, plug-and-play solution. Like, it may not be what's best for them, but that might be what's most convenient. There was a case in the media recently about the use of Google Ads and Meta tracking pixels on police websites. And this particular, and it was applied as a sort of blanket page template to the whole site, which meant that there was Meta and Google, double-click, tracking on the page where people go to report intimate partner violence, sexual assault. That's not necessarily the sort of data that you want to be responsible for handing over to Meta or Google. But I think because the focus of this site build was, you know, get functionality, and they were using retargeting to give to show ads to people who were looking at the jobs page. So they follow them around the internet with, you know, come and be a police officer. But the template was applied on a site-wide basis.
And it's those small sort of lacks of thought,
yeah, exactly,
that have the media going into a frenzy and making it much worse. If, you know, the right people had thought about the right things at the time, you would say, I'm going to be targeting the jobs. I will just put this on the jobs section of the site. Honestly, people, think about your objective and your target and actually stick to that and do what's relevant and useful.
Preach.
Yeah, in anything, even if you're just, you know, tracking functionality. You know, at one point we were like, we want to know what people select from a drop-down. And the developers get over enthusiastic and we're like, we'll collect everything in a form field. And I'm like, whoa, Camel, just stop. Don't just delete that bit of code. Because you know that bit that blanket does it? You might be doing it on the credit card fields. Oh yeah, delete. Luckily that never got anywhere. But you know, we've just got to just take a step back and think, what am I going to do with this? What can I do? What can I realistically achieve? What's the actual objective, and what am I accidentally going to fuck up?
Yeah, what shouldn't I do?
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I mean,
one size fits none.
Yeah, and they don't. And yeah, where you're saying that there's some tools and people just want to use GA because it's easier, it's straightforward, or there's guides out there. Well, actually, still, it's never been one size fits all. I've never, like, even with Universal, where your navigation was always the same, I'm like, no, you have to customize it to suit your business's needs. Now, this is forced upon you in GA4, which I really like, the fact that you get to go in and choose what metrics and dimensions can be reported on. So it gives the user the ability to say, well, look, you know, this sort of engagement stuff might not matter, but I need my conversion rate, and I'm going to customize it, and I'm going to give myself only the metrics that matter about the things that matter, about the things that I can track sensibly. And you can really tailor it to actually do the right job for you by it now having that flexibility and customizability. Is that a word? I'm going to make that a word. There's issues with various things. There's issues with everything. I mean,
always.
Let's be honest. So we'll just work with what we've got and make the best of it. And yeah.
I mean, it's because GA4 is the monopolist. It's what everybody uses. When they come out and they make a change, you have to comply because that's the only choice you've got.
I mean, in this instance,
yeah, and so it's kind of like I ask people sometimes, what positive benefits have you seen from Brexit? For the UK, right? And so it's the same question I have. Like, if you look at it from the customer's point of view, the client's point of view, what positive benefits have you seen from GA4?
I have. That's a great question. The ability to customize your reports and not have the same interface for everything. The ability to get a slightly more manageable tracking model. So there have definitely been something. Choosing where your server's located. Tick a box over here.
Not that it really matters.
No, yeah. Let's be honest, in the grand scheme of things. But they're pretending to care.
Well, that's a tick
So
box, isn't it?
yeah, they're at least trying and going towards caring. So there have been some benefits, but I think there was a lot of people who did just assume, oh, well, I have to make the change and I will just do GA4. Then we did have about 50% of people and clients going, well, what else is there? And we tried a few other things out. But for the type of people that my business works with, they're sort of medium-sized e-commerce businesses, and they didn't have the ability to then learn a whole new platform or implement a whole new stack or become experts in a new thing. So it was often a case of, just making the best of what you've got, but then the ability to customize it is then where we can sort of tailor it and make it really work for people. But yeah, no, it was a good opportunity to take a step back and say, one, what else is available? Two, what's going to suit us best? Reevaluate. So we made everybody reevaluate what tracking KPIs they needed and they wanted. So it's a really good opportunity. And it actually, as much as I moan about the timing of it and them announcing that they're turning off a product during lockdown, when we were far too busy coping with life and, just coping, and then they throw this curveball at us, actually, it was a great time to do it because who cares about comparing to that data? Your year-on-year comparison, what, you want to compare to 2020 or 2021? Hello! That was a weird time. So actually, the timing has worked out. So we can always find the positives in this.
I just know we work with hundreds of PPC agencies, and we heard from many that were extremely performance-driven. They had performance down across the board after the implementations.
Well, maybe their previous implementation was wrong. So did they audit that and check that Universal was accurate? That's always a fun one. But no, yeah.
They're ad guys, so
yeah,
I don't know, but
yeah,
they weren't happy. That's all I know.
And it is hard to get the numbers to match. It honestly is. There's a lot of, they won't ever match. But there have been a lot of questions as to, is this accurate? Which one's more accurate? Which version of the truth am I going to go with? And
yeah, we heard a lot of 20-30% variances.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Predominantly, we've spotted that GA4 generally would over-record because if people have the cookie consent turned on. So that's been a really interesting one because if you have the right configuration, if you have a certain set of circumstances, such as using cookie consent and the way that you've set the settings up, what it does is it estimates how many people rejected the cookies and it adds it on. And so this is where we know the 40% for one client for the cookie non-acceptance, because that's how overinflated GA4 was, and there was no other cause for it than that. So I can, see that that's one of the challenges, and then there's a few other things that crop up that make you question your data accuracy again. Yeah, it's been fun.
I've worked with quite a lot of charities who perhaps shouldn't, like the Met Police site, Nottinghamshire Police site, there are pages that they shouldn't have tracking on.
Yep.
So because they're aimed at people in particularly vulnerable situations, and it's nobody else's business.
How do people not think about it? I just don't
Well, tunnel vision,
Yeah,
if it's your job to meet KPIs and not your job to think about the bigger picture, that's what's going to happen. So
we have a couple of clients where we deliberately don't put any tracking, we don't even put GTM on certain pages. Now, it might be that sort of reason, or it might be because actually if there was any risk to the thing, then the business would fall down, sort of thing. And then, it's just not safe to have that there. That's more of an extreme situation, but we have had to make that decision that we won't be even putting GTM on the page to keep that a safe space. And, you need a holistic, balanced, whole world view of these things, and to really, just use your brain.
When I've talked to them about, maybe you should turn off this here and there, usually it transpires they're not even looking
And they didn't even know
at
it
the
was
data.
there.
They didn't know it was
No.
there because they're not looking at the data they're getting back.
put it site-wide,
They've gone
blanket.
through the motions of putting analytics on because everybody does it, and that's what they got taught at marketing school, or whatever. I don't really know about the career path of digital marketing, but they've done what everybody else does because everybody else does it, and not really stopped to think about, like going back to what we were saying earlier, what it is they're trying to achieve and how they should go about trying to achieve that. And then, some just turned off their analytics altogether because they weren't getting any value from it, or the potential risks exceeded the value they were getting. Others switched to other platforms. Others, put in the kind of investment of time and effort to minimise, to still use it, but only where they'd identified that they really needed it. And all of those things could have been done up front. It's just that nobody thought about it.
Yeah.
Speaking of career paths, you mentioned, clearly analytics is getting much more complex in the future with these different issues going on. Where do you see the career paths and the needs kind of in the future to be thinking about for those considering the field?
It's a
or
great
building
question.
businesses around
Yeah.
the field. Yeah.
So analytics is, I think everybody's sort of fallen into it accidentally, because you don't go to school and learn that analytics is an industry, is a career you could have, right? Maybe things are changing since I was there, but it's been really interesting. And then the other side of it is that analytics comes in so many different formats. So even in this room, we're going to have techie people who just work in GTM. Not just, there's no just about that, but who are experts in GTM. Then you've got your CRO people, you've got your paid media people who might need to know the performance. You've got your all-round website optimizers, digital marketers. So, even in my little team, we've got the developers, but then the dashboarders or the people who tell stories with the data. Then you've got, there's so many different bits to it. What I found really hard is finding people who can do all of it, or at least a lot of it. That's sort of a rare breed. So people will maybe either be on the techie side, or they might be on sort of the data science-y analytics, but then there's that middle ground where you sort of can look at the data and get stuff out of it, but you also know a bit about the implementation. So it can be such a broad range of skills that suit somebody to be in analytics. There's a lot of different people it could appeal to, but they don't know it exists as an industry as well. So that's quite an interesting one.
Looking in from the outside, I see a growing number of people who can work with data, who understand the tools they're using, and they can do maths, but they don't necessarily have the big picture understanding of context and people and society to be able to interpret that data usefully. I would like to see more psychologists, sociologists, anthropologists, and historians being brought into analytics teams. People who understand the people factors that can be integrated with the function and technology factors, because again, we're seeing at the upper echelons of history, people making the same mistakes because they're so focused on product and function, and kind of causing effects that reach out to a lot of people, that sociologists, anthropologists, psychologists, and historians have been kind of saying, hang on a minute, slow down, there are second order effects here, there are systemic outcomes of doing these things. So again, it goes back to the knowing what it is you want to do and being able to design and build for that thing, and not just looking at your code camp and your tools, but also thinking, what is it about people that I'm trying to achieve here.
And that's why we work with marketing teams, because we're the techies, and then we speak to the marketing teams, and they have a little bit more view of the people behind it and things like that, especially compared to some of the geekier people in the analytics world. So you've got to work together and collaborate. But unfortunately, people don't have the budgets and the team sizes to be able to bring in these individual specialists, and it's bloody difficult to find somebody who can think about all of those 10 different things whilst achieving the day job. So yeah, we have a lot of challenges on our hands, but you know, as long as we're trying to do our best, getting all holistic here, or,
I think
you know.
multidisciplinary collaboration
Yeah.
is so important because you can be great at wrangling numbers, but if you don't have a contextual understanding of what those numbers represent and how to use them, then you're never going to be able to get the best from them. So, you know, working with other teams, not just marketers and not just legal, but also like tech ethicists and you know, human rights activist groups and academic research into you know, the effects of the tools and psychologists, obviously, because essentially digital marketing is the levering of technology for psychological advantage. That's what it's for.
But then you need to combine it with the business
Yes,
side.
exactly.
So you've got those people in that sort of train of thought, that type of brain, and then you've got all the different types of people within a business. So, you know, where I'm coming from, some of the experience I had working in-house at a huge e-commerce company, you get to see the customer service team, the translation team, the product development team, the buyers, merchandisers, the finance team, and working with all of those people as well gives you a nice overview of, right, as a team, where are we going and where can we, what are our business objectives that really will suit what we're working on. So, you know, you don't always have the academics within a business, but if you can use your, you know, a bit of research or that sort of thing, bring that in and just learn from all the other people as well, then you can actually really do a bit of a better job with your analytics, because you can make it relevant to each of the team's KPIs, you can make it relevant to the business, you can make sure you're not being a dick about it at the same time. So just bringing everything in together, you know, basically we just need to learn to juggle lots and lots of things, and we can thrive in this industry, right?
Yeah, I used to, in e-commerce, run e-commerce companies, I used to look at all the different sources of traffic and try to assign a value to every click that comes in, and then look at, you know, where are you missing out on value. Look at the search queries that are made on the site. Say, all right, we've got this volume of traffic that's not performing well. What can I find from a merchandising perspective to get a better yield out of that? And sometimes you look at your competitors, you look at different areas, and you look and say, okay, that product is a need. I've got traffic for it. If I place this product there and put it at a good price, all of a sudden I convert that traffic and it turns into, you know, £2.22 a click coming in revenue to £4.28 without having to do anything on the traffic side, simply merchandising the products better to fill that need.
Yeah, helping the customer. You're using the data to try and help.
Because they're
the
looking
people.
for this product on your site.
Exactly. So
yeah,
you've got to make it easier for them to actually achieve their objective, and their objective generally ties into the business objective. So if you can make that a smoother journey, great. And we do need the data to be able to do that. Yeah. So yeah, that's why I do feel like analytics is such an important factor in a business and the growth potential.
Any other questions? Yeah. Here's one, there's one back there, yeah.
Sorry, making you run around again.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm an SEO, and in our agency we're lucky enough to have a solutions department, so they work with BigQuery and Analytics and Lumar, but I don't know what I should be asking them to help me create. So I was wondering, in GA4, are there any new features that you love and you think are really useful for an e-com client, for example? Like, what types of data can I get out of that and visualize for my clients?
Cool. Okay, so if anybody didn't hear, the question was all about how you can use GA4 for better e-commerce understanding, especially if you happen to have a little pot of unicorns. Sorry, a data BI and solutions team. So that's exactly, you know, what's valuable about analytics. So what I think is great about GA4 and then being able to put it into BigQuery. One of the benefits, if you've got a BigQuery capacity, is that you can then do a bit more of a investigation into the session level segments. That's what I'm trying to say. So you can do a bit better segment analysis and breakdowns there than you can in the interface. So that's something that you could utilize your BI team to achieve. So you'd be able to say, actually, give me the data that came in organically and what happened there. So, you know, landing pages and what converted and things like that. And then you can segment it a bit further and say, you know, tell me other things about these people, or tell me how many visits to the site it took for each of these people to be able to do that, and what other channels were they using, and was organic, you know, early in the journey or not. So there's sort of some things like that they'd be able to do. And BigQuery really opens it up to being able to query the raw data. And if you think about the raw data, within that, each hit does have a, don't tell Rowan yet, I think you know. No, it has a user identifier. So, you know, you can stitch those sessions together. And yeah, sorry. So, you know, but, you know, generally it doesn't give away who they are. So we can, I can't hear anything over here. So yeah, so we can use that delicately in order to try and understand a little bit more about these people. Now, again, put your fingers in your ears. I like to try and do analysis where it's like, right, give me the segment where people spent over £100. What am I going to do with, you know, where did those people come from? Where can I get the valuable customers from? And if I did, what are the organic terms that generate the highest spend? For example, not the organic terms, we don't get that anymore, but the landing pages and the core content. So what content is driving my high value people to the site? And what you could then do is feedback, or you could combine in BigQuery with some other data. I'm going to get told off again. Recency, frequency, monetary kind of segments is really interesting. And sometimes, if it's right to do so, you could put that in as parameters if somebody's logging in and things like that. And you could say, look, I'm going to add in the parameter, the loyalty level that this person is at. And if they've spent a lot of money on the site, let's tag them as that. So that you can then go and segment that data set in BigQuery and do analysis and compare, how did my high spenders compare to my low spenders? Where are they coming from? What have I done with them? What have I done with them? How did I get them? How am I going to treat them nicely? And you know, you can sort of work out how to nurture your business growth through slightly more advanced segmentation and things like that, which I think is really much more possible once you've got your BI and BigQuery team going and you're able to sort of do that sort of thing. Doing that kind of thing in the interface is really, really clunky. So, yeah.
Yeah, on a kind of a side note to that is, like when we work, like if you've got these fast scaling businesses, that we found the best way to do is work on, it's kind of the 80-20 rule. Take the top 10%, it works really well, and the bottom 10% doesn't work very well. And keep focusing on those, and then the middle will just, as you improve this, it'll kind of move up, and you'll keep working on the work, and then this, you just keep better and better at this. If one of the tools that's good for that is the Microsoft Clarity product, the analytics, and it looks at, it doesn't try to compete with Google Analytics. It just looks at a lot of very user journey and issues on the website. And it'll find a lot of things like when people are rage clicks and this clicks and technical errors and so forth. And so it kind of puts a bit of hygiene on the site, and you can see where there's problems. And so looking at that bottom 10%, where are the problems that are kind of harming your traffic? And that's a free tool that's been very useful for a lot of companies we see to kind of look at that hygiene level that Google doesn't really
right,
give.
and that's a great thing. So something I've talked about with some other people, and we've implemented for a few people as well, is negative conversion tracking.
Yeah.
So what does it look like when somebody's having a bad experience on the site? How are we tracking, like understanding that that's happening? What does it look like? What pattern of behavior? Mm-hmm. Have they visited 4 FAQ pages and then exited? Or have they, you know, done some rage clicking? You know, how do you identify what a bad journey looks like? And if you can segment or add a parameter that says this person appears to be having a bad journey, right, how did they get there? Are they the wrong type of customer? Do we need to turn off that campaign that's driving people into the wrong thing, especially if Google are going and doing their performance max things or estimating or, you know, what they do, and it's valuable, and you're like, it's wrong. So yeah, do have a look out for the negative.
One of the journeys that we've seen on that type of thing is going to the different site, add to cart, whatever, and then they visit your about us or contact us or privacy policy or terms and conditions, and then leave.
Yeah, what did they see that they didn't like?
Yeah, there's a trust issue somewhere there. There's something there that causes them to say, no, I'm not going to complete this order. And so it has nothing to do with the merchandise, whatever. It's purely a trust issue. And that.
The answer to that is to be trustworthy.
Of course.
But if you don't convey that on your website.
Exactly. If the person writing those pages hasn't thought about what concerns are people going to have and could preempt what communication is required, yeah.
Happens
Somebody
all
who
the
does
time.
a lot of writing privacy notices and stuff for clients, when you write out exactly what they're doing, they go, you can't tell people that. They won't want to do business with us. And that obviously creates a dilemma because you've got to tell people what you're doing. So I think escalate, like internally, from a business point of view, escalation paths to management and decision making are really key things to have as outputs and workflows from the data you get back. Because it's kind of no use like looking at the data going, oh, you know, people are running for the cover after reading our privacy notice. And you can, you know, tweak the cosmetics of the privacy notice, but
If they're reading it that late in the journey, it's not like they're not in the right place anyway, or they've had the wrong journey. But I feel like with your point, it's definitely around things like delivery costs, returns things.
Yeah.
That's definitely, if you see those at that point in the journey after they've added to cart, you know, that's when you can raise that actually maybe those are the wrong offerings and you could test a better delivery.
And as an analytics, looking at those type of, I would go into the businesses and a lot of the communication, you'll see a lot of the data, but if you go talk to the sales teams, go talk to the customer service team, talk to the warehouse team, the returns, look for problems.
Yeah.
And in growing, if you go look for the problems, because life is about solving problems, right? A lot of people want to ignore it and this, and it's not my remit, or whatever. But if you go out and you look and you go talk to people and look for the problems, it'll make sense why you're seeing that data there, and then you can go present solutions. And that's how, it's like going into if you want to be one of the most important people in a business, what you need to do is go look for problems that nobody else wants to solve. Like, tell me what's happening that nobody else wants to solve. You go work on that problem, and you become very valuable to that business because you're solving core problems. And you will see a lot of these if you really look hard in the analytics, you'll see a lot of them, but you got to go talk to people in order to kind of go through it. And so communication is key.
It's good to combine it with some qualitative stuff and even go and listen into some customer service calls and things like that, especially if you're in-house. Just understand where they're coming from and what your customers are feeling to be able to address it better on the website and do better communication at a human level. To then, and you've got the data to back it up.
We had one company that we were working with that had problems conversion. You look at it, all these sorts of things, and so we did that. We put in phone recording, listed a bunch of calls. We came into the office. They were complaining about this, and then we said, okay, listen to this. And they call up, big order. The person wants to see it. The person answered the phone. Oh well, I don't know. Well, maybe call back. Lose the order. And so right there, the CEO, instead of the anger was taken from the data folks to, bam, he's like off on the whole way they handle incoming phone calls because they were bungling all this work was being done on the digital side and being totally hosed up.
And then the humans messed it up.
Exactly. so it's, you got to close all the loops out.
Yeah, definitely. You can never take it as the full picture. You've always got to understand there's more to it. But yeah, we really went off on one. That was, but yeah, cool. I'm conscious. Sorry.
There's one back
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I guess most people in this room use analytics, or they do want to use analytics in very near future. So I have a question. I think it's mostly for Anna. I'm not sure. But you have been using it for a long time. Any kind of simple, easy tips, any massive mistakes you see, like again and again, you coming, that you can give some advice, like these are the easy fixes I can give you in 2-3 minutes, common mistakes we can bring from this panel. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Common mistakes in analytics. Double tracking, putting 2 sets of tracking code on the page. not tracking parameters against the correct things. So you've got some parameters being sent on an e-commerce purchase, but you can't tie it back to earlier in the session. So you can't actually see whether your logged in users were performing adequately. You've got the issues with configuring some of the, so GA4 specifically, looking at the enhanced events and being able to configure those correctly. You'll quite often see that the search tracking, for example, internal search engine tracking isn't set up or working correctly. And then forgetting to define key parameters as custom definitions so that you can't actually access the data once you've built it. So that keeps happening. So you've got to follow the steps all the way through. Once you've got the tracking code right, you've got to then define it in the GA4 interface to be able to see it in the standard reports. So that's something we see. And then there's quite a few hidden settings in GA4 that people aren't aware of, and until they start asking us why things don't look right, and we're like, oh, well, okay, well, it's maybe because you're using a blended model, or it's maybe because your settings are timing out, or whatever it might be. So adjusting your data retention to suit your business legal terms, long as possible. And if you are adjusting some of the other settings, you've got the configuration things, you've got different attribution models, but those only affect certain accounts. So it's just understanding how it works. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, it's an analytics tool, or it's just another tool, it should just work out of the box. But it really takes a lot of customization to get it right. So to be able to use these tools, you do have to educate yourself and learn way more than you expect, which makes it really difficult when you're a small business or a small team, or you're one person trying to juggle all of the digital marketing requirements, and yet you suddenly also have to be an analytics implementation and reporting specialist. Something else that's really key is customizing your GA4 interface or whatever reporting suite you're using. Customize it to suit your needs and your team's needs and your business needs, even with 3 different sets of reports. These are mine on a daily basis. These are the wider teams or the EMEA team, and versus the US team. Customize them specifically for filtered data if that's required. And then what do the stakeholders need to see? So let's customize that and send them the data that they need to see. So you've got to tailor the hell out of it to make it work for you. You cannot just assume that it is a solution that is going to just work out of the box. Like, I used to even say this with Universal. Like, you had to tailor it to suit your needs. You had to work out what event tracking you needed, whether e-commerce tracking was adequate, and what information you put into that that's going to be most relevant to the business. So you've really got to be able to get that right, you've got to understand your business objectives. So some of you sitting here, you might be like, oh, well, I'm just an SEO. But no, go and ask the CEO, what is the purpose of your website? What do you want? Do you want revenue? Do you want worldwide domination? Where do we sit between those two things? What's it going to be? So you can really work out where your targets need to be, what you want to achieve from doing that. And actually, it might be it's all about new customer acquisition, or it might be about reaching a new market. And without those conversations, then you can't tailor what it is that you're doing. But the more useful you can make yourself, that's really important. And then the final thing in my 4-minute rant about this is making sure that you can automate as much as possible. So yes, it's good to do these manual checks and go in and do these deep dives, but stop spending 2 hours building a report. Just get it built automatically in the space of a few minutes and spend those 2 hours analyzing it, thinking about what I can do with it. How am I going to use this to the benefit of the customers or the benefit of the business, and all of those sorts of things. So really tailoring your whole approach to what is going to be most beneficial for everybody. Okay, I'll take a breath now. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, I always prefer to have 2 sets of analytics running, because something breaks sometimes, you don't notice it, you go back, but if you've got 2 sets of different types of tracking or analytics running, then if one breaks, you notice it in the other one.
Or set up an alert. That would be also quite helpful. Set up alerts so that you know if your data stops tracking, whether it's custom insights or some other, or even if you're going old school, and get some server logs going just so that you can identify if the website is going down. There's all sorts of different things that you could understand proactively, as well as waiting to notice that something's gone wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we might have time for one more question.
Is there anybody in the room who hasn't, felt that we've addressed their topic today? No? No? Those people left already. Okay.
Yeah, right here.
One way.
Yeah. We got, yeah, right there.
Throw the mic.
Hi, my name's Sarah. It's a funny one, and I'm really mixed in my opinion of this, but with platforms like Hotjar, MS Clarity, where as a marketer, super helpful for us when we're looking at website analysis and how we're analysing bugbears with websites. We've talked about that a little bit today, but morally it feels creepy, and we've talked a lot about ethics today, and do you feel like those platforms have a future? Should they be worried about, the fact that we can see that user journey all the way to checkout? They do block out credit card numbers, but you can see that journey. Do you think they should be more worried? Should we be worried about using them? What's your thoughts?
Big question.
I don't care what she thinks. I think those tools are incredible.
And I'm going to.
I'm running a business, and it's like you could, to go see, and you're like, man, why did we do that? That was stupid.
Well,
and they're like,
exactly.
Clearly you've got to, there's a technical term in the software world for. It's called user failure.
ID10T error.
Yeah, no, you could pay
and
a
it's
load.
like when you realize you just built something that's
that
stupid.
people don't know how to use.
Yeah,
exactly. So I've sat in a room with actual user testing where you're like, no, you come and here's your objective, and you will then go through this journey and you sit and watch them live. So I've done, Hotjar live sessions, but that person has obviously agreed to be watched doing that. But I don't think that's a natural environment, and they're not a natural user. But so I'm sort of in the middle where I like it, but I only ever use it like when I have to, when I feel like there's a problem with the site, or when or we'll just use it for a short burst of time. I really don't like doing that unnecessarily, but then actually sometimes it can be really beneficial for spotting these pain in the ass issues with the website that you hadn't noticed. But then also you should have a testing team internally anyway who should be spotting these things and liaising with customer service to find all the feedback that comes in specifically about the website, generally for me, because I get pissed off with websites and tell customer service that they need to fix it. But yeah, it can be really valuable. But again, I understand the creepiness, and I see it like CCTV. And it's like, yeah, it is, but I walk past CCTV cameras quite often, and they could probably, they could probably piece my journey together. Why the hell they'd want to?
So there's no such thing as a technology that only nice people can use in good ways. Anytime you've got a technology, it's going to have potentially abusive applications. It's also going to have hazardous applications where the outcomes are adverse even when people's intents were good. And that's why we have things like laws that govern how these things are supposed to be used. But then you've got the tension between people wanting to do new, exciting things with benign intent and good ideas, but then you get scope creep that allows the nefarious. So there's no good answer, and this really comes down to the organisation's values, ethics, and governance. Because if the organisation has not defined their values, they don't have values. If the organisation has not had a conversation about ethics, they don't have ethics. And if the organisation doesn't have ways for people to raise challenging questions, to say, what does doing right look like for us? What are we comfortable with? What are we comfortable with being known to do? Then the organisation doesn't have ethics and values governance. Those are really hard things to bring into the modern workplace because they can't be quantified. They take up time and effort. They don't look like productivity because they're not generating anything. But they're really, really important. So these tools are immensely clever and immensely useful. And in responsible hands, there's nothing wrong with them. But by default, people's hands, when they're trying to get stuff done, are not always responsible. You have to work to make the effort to be those responsible hands.
There was talk about this sort of thing. Some people got pretty upset when they saw the news articles about how the councils have analytics into watching every website that their tenant, the people in the go to. So they know what banks you go to online. They know what this. They know what that. Whatever. This stuff is very pervasive. So I think, this first-party data of being able to see, hey, I've got a website selling flowers, so be able to see where people clicked and weren't able to check out is relatively tame compared to some of the other things out there. And particularly if you look at the difference between first-party data and third-party data. The third-party stuff, when people like insert tracking across different sites, across different where you go, across all these different things, that's a very different story than my own little website and how do people interact with my website, and that doesn't go anywhere else. So.
Yeah, and also always check the T's and C's to see if the platform you're using is granting itself the right to reuse the data supplying for purposes which they define and you have no control over. Because if they are doing that, A, you've got legal problems, B, you've got ethics problems, and C, you've got business problems, because who's to say that your data isn't going to find its way to competitors?
Yeah, but do you trust them? I mean, they all get, like Google, they get, location tracking off, phones turned off, it's still tracking. These guys get sued left and right, front and center all over the world because they don't comply with their own terms. So
We can't.
you have to be cynical.
Be a nice
do your
person,
best, do what you
try
can.
hard, try and remember to read the laws and follow them. And then it should all work out nicely.
I call it the Git test.
Yeah.
Like, don't be a
Don't
Git.
be a Git.
If you went out on the street, picked a random person and described exactly to them what you were doing and said, this is with your data, and will they think that you're being a Git? Because if they will think that, then probably there's room for you to adjust your posture and and think a little bit harder, maybe make some changes about how to be less of a Git, or maybe it's about how you're communicating what you're doing. The Git test is really worthwhile, because if you're being a Git, you're probably breaking the law as well. But if you're not breaking the law and you're being a Git, that's probably going to backfire on your business at some point.
Yeah. So we're out of time now. So if you take away anything, it's simply don't be a Git. So, thank you all very much.
There we go.